If you want to write stories your readers will love, there are three things you need to do. Understand storytelling principles, see how others have applied the principles, and then use them in your own work. Here on the Story Nerd podcast, our goal is to demystify story theory. We'll help you with the first two steps so that you can get started with the third. My name is Valerie Francis. I'm an author and a story editor, and I teach women who are writing in all genres how stories work so they can finish their books faster and without frustration.
And I'm Melanie Hill, editor, poet, and award-winning author of middle grade novel Jet Cooper, and I help writers identify and solve their story problems.
On today's episode, Melanie pitched Notting Hill so that we can study the premise. This 1999 film was directed by Roger Mitchell from a screenplay by screenwriter Richard Curtis. Of course, there will be spoilers because we can't talk about the movie without talking about the movie. But I think you'll all be okay with this one. We all know how this goes. Spoiler alert, there's a happily ever after. And please help other writers find our show by leaving a rating and review. Apple Podcast listeners, you know what to do by now. Go to the show's landing page, scroll to the bottom, click the stars. It is that simple. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button so you never miss an episode. All right, Miss Melanie, how did you go with your study of the premise this week?
Well, it was actually pretty good, and I think I had a bit of fun this week. I did a few different things this week, but I think that will work well because this is a fairly well-known movie. It's I won't say it's formulaic, but it's a good movie, and everybody kind of knows the storyline, even if they haven't seen it for quite some time. Now, last week I explored the second logline formula that I found. And I also created the 2-sentence lineup story summary, which is proposed by Dwight V. Swain. Now, both of these methods showed flaws in Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. And one of the reasons why I wanted to study the premise this season was to test an approach, but also to test one of John Truby's statements, which is that the premise is a way for writers to test story ideas and also compare ideas, see if they're viable or not, see if they're going to work, see which ones catch your attention as a writer, ones that you want to get invested in and spend a lot of time developing. Now, last week proved that writers can and should use something like the lineup or a logline formula to do just that. They're handy little tools to have. Even if they're not quite a premise, they're still really good tools to have in your back pocket. And in my opinion, you should at least, especially after your first draft, have a logline or a premise ready to go so that it will help guide you through the next draft of your story. Now, this week, I want to go back to John Truby's definition of a premise because I want to focus on his requirement to have a sense of the ending. Now, Notting Hill is a good movie to test a sense of an ending because it's a courtship romance story. And romances generally have endings where a couple gets together. Now, it's true confession time. This week, I tried to think of a way to add variety to the happily ever after ending of the premise. And I thought the sense of the ending in a romance of a premise could be the proof of love convention because that has the potential to be the most surprising but inevitable climactic moment in the story. However, my experiment was a disaster because explaining the proof of love was really difficult, and especially if I wanted to maintain one short sentence premise. That I will go through my experiment and I'll give you an example of what I mean and why it was a bit of a disaster. Now, in episode 1, I said that Truby summarizes the premise as a simple combination of character, plot, and event that starts the action, but also that readers need a sense of the character and the outcome of a story. Now, by identifying those components, we should be able to create a single sentence premise. Now, to help create the premise, I broke down Truby's components into 4 dot points, and I wrote notes against each of those points. Now I'm going to go through my responses to the 4 points, and then I'm going to read my premise sentence. But what I want you to hear as I go through my notes against each of the points is that they are longer than the actual premise sentence. And this really helped me clarify what needed to be included in the premise and also what I could leave out of it. Now, I'll also add that I love playing around with words and sentences this way, and it usually takes a few goes to get something that I can work with. All right, so here we go with me breaking it down. So the protagonist. So William Thacker is a Notting Hill travel bookshop owner. The inciting incident is that he unknowingly meets a famous actress in his Notting Hill bookstore. The action and motivation, which is really the plot, is that they establish a strong attraction against a backdrop of intense media interest and intrusion. And the sense of an ending, or the ending, is they actually end up getting married. Now, so there's a few words in there, right? There's more words in there than I'm going to use when I describe or read out my actual premise. So here's my premise. Notting Hill bookshop owner falls in love with a famous actress, and despite intense media intrusion, they fall in love and marry. Now, my first attempt was a bit longer than that, and then I cut a few words out. But what's left is a good summary of Notting Hill. Now, I have tweaked the action and motivation, so the plot part of the sentence, to reflect the main obstacle. And that's because I like to focus on the main force of antagonism, or at least have a force of antagonism in there, because I find that that really helps guide me as I'm writing my story. Now, just for fun, I'm going to read you the premise that I tried to write with a focus on the proof of love part of the movie, or the proof of love scene. All right, so here we go. Notting Hill bookshop owner meets and falls in love with a famous actress, and he rejects her request for a relationship and later changes his mind and declares his love during a press conference. So that's really, and again, because you're trying to explain a scene, I don't think it works very well. So the outcome is stick with the sense of the ending, and I think you'll go right. Now, just because I like playing with words and I need to practice writing premises, I decided to do a few other things with Notting Hill this week. So here's a few other goes that I had, and see if you can pick up what I've done here. A famous movie star falls in love with a Notting Hill book owner, and despite the fear of her private life being exposed by the media, they fall in love and marry. So what I've done here is I've changed the story from William's point of view to Anna's, and I've also changed the action and motivation section to be a bit more in line with her point of view. And here's another one. Notting Hill bookshop owner falls in love with a famous actress, and he can't commit to a life in the public eye, so they go their separate ways. Now, I've changed the ending to be pessimistic. Now, I know that that wouldn't sell very well, but it's fun to mess around with the ideas and see which premise grabs your attention. Testing your story ideas this way is a great exercise in possibilities. Now, here's another option. What if I wanted to write a story about William's friends, Max and Bella? So here I had a go at that. A paraplegic woman and her husband decide to try for a baby, and after many failed attempts, their twins arrive. Now, I know that didn't happen in the movie, but I'm just playing around with the possibility of what could be a storyline for Max and Bella. And here's another one just for fun. An odd Welsh man is introduced to his flatmate's sister, and after one date, he's surprised when she decides to marry him. Now, what I really wanted to focus on this week was the ending, because that's what differentiates a premise from a logline. Knowing how the story ends is like having a lighthouse to guide you through the stormy middle part of writing. And Truby says that knowing the ending gives writers the perseverance to get through the weeks to years of hard slog. And I actually agree with him. I really agree with him on that. I think it makes it a lot easier if you know where your story is going to end. The other point that Truby makes is that, which is equally important, is that all the decisions a writer makes should fit within the scope of the premise. So the story events, the symbols, the characters, and themes are all derived from the premise. And again, I thoroughly agree with this. So when I've been off track or struggling with sections of my novels or short stories, I go back to the premise and plan in my plan and I check in with it. I make sure that everything that I'm doing aligns or tries to identify where I'm going off track a little bit. And this usually helps me refocus and get back on track. So if you don't have a premise for your story and you're struggling, then do what I've done today. Create 4 dot points, character, plot, the inciting incident, and give yourself a sense of the ending, or write the ending, or know what the ending is. Write a sentence that combines those elements. And if you can't do that, then you've identified your first story problem. If you can write the sentence and you don't like it, play around with it until you have your eureka moment and then go from there. Okay, Valerie, that's the end of my part for this week. And I had a lot of fun playing around with that premise, especially with Notting Hill. And it's a romance, so it kind of makes it easy as well. But how did you go with William, and what sort of protagonist is he?
I really like your study this season, and that is a fun exercise to go through. So,
Yeah.
listen, I really encourage everyone to do it because it's so eye-opening. It is
Yeah.
so eye-opening. And you can do it with your current work in progress. You can do it with a movie like Notting Hill that you know
Hmm.
really well, just to flex that muscle a little bit and see how it goes. What a great exercise. Okay. William Thacker, what kind of protagonist is he? Well, Melanie, you have done me a solid this week, my friend. Thank you. I owe you one.
You are welcome. I was relieved for you. I went, oh, I think I know. This is going to make up for Mrs. Harris, I think.
Yes. Yes. Last week's episode was all about Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. And I chose it hoping that Ada Harris was going to be an every woman type of character, but she wasn't. And in that episode, you'll remember that I even said that there are some actors, like Hugh Grant, who have made a career out of playing the everyman. Now, especially in the early part of Hugh Grant's career. And here we are, Hugh Grant in Notting Hill playing a straight up version of the everyman type of protagonist. This is just a beautiful example. Chef's kiss. The everyman, every woman is a character who's just like us. And also, he or she is just like most of the other characters in the story. They're not vastly superior or vastly inferior. They're people who are just trying to get on in life. William Thacker is about as ordinary as they come. Richard Curtis introduces him through voiceover, where William himself explains how ordinary he is. This is the opening to the movie, and it's a considerable voiceover, okay? And this comes over video of William just walking through the streets of Notting Hill. And this is what he says. Of course, I'd seen her films and always thought she was, well, fabulous. But you know, a million miles from the world I live in, which is here, Notting Hill, my favorite bit of London. There's the market on weekdays selling every fruit and vegetable known to man, the tattoo parlor with a guy outside who got drunk and now can't remember why he chose I Love Ken, the radical hairdressers where everyone comes out looking like the Cookie Monster, whether they wanted to or not. And suddenly it's the weekend, and from break of day, hundreds of stalls appear out of nowhere filling Portobello Road, right up to Notting Hill Gate. And wherever you look, thousands of people are buying millions of antiques, some genuine and some not quite so genuine. And what's great is that lots of friends have ended up in this part of London. That's Tony, for example, architect turned chef, who recently invested all the money he ever earned in a new restaurant. And so this is where I spend my days and years, in this small village in the middle of the city, in a house with a blue door, that my wife and I bought together before she left me for a man who looked exactly like Harrison Ford, and where I now lead a strange half-life with a lodger called Spike. So that's William. He's just like all of the other people living in Notting Hill, like his friend Tony, like his friends Bertie and Bella and Max. He's doing a little better than Spike financially and socially, frankly, but not as well as Max and Bella in relationships. But if you take the average of it all, he's on par. He's about even. Like he- he's not doing radically better than any of his chums, nor is he doing radically worse. He's just hanging out. He's just an average guy. But he's also like us, the viewer. He's just trying to earn a living. He's trying to do the right thing. He's a nice guy, all in all. And like us, he wants to love and be loved. Now, we can empathize with all of this immediately. And that is the power of the everyman. Instant reader empathy. Now, the risk, the flip side of that coin, the risk is that unless you set it up properly, there might not be any curiosity. That's where Anna comes in. She is the hero type of character because she is way, and I mean way, out of William's league. She's a beautiful movie star. She's a multimillionaire, and she's a world traveler. By contrast, William is average looking. Now, I know it's Hugh Grant, okay, and everyone thinks that he is super sexy, especially in those days, right? I mean, he was famous for his hair, for example, which, fun fact, he hated. He cut it off really short as soon as he could. But in this film, he is not a movie star. And Hugh Grant, as an actor, is not like the big movie star, leading man, classically good looking guy. That's not his look. He's not an unattractive man by any stretch of the imagination. For that, we have Spike. And they have made that actor, they've made him up to look really repulsive. The way I don't even think they're his real teeth. I think they're false teeth. They've got his hair all weird. They've given him really weird clothes. He looks dirty, like he's just gross. But William is not chiseled either, right? I mean, for that, we've got Jeff, Anna's American Hollywood actor, also movie star boyfriend. William is somewhere in between, right? He's like the rest of us. Very few of us look like Spike. Very few of us look like Jeff. Most of us are, just hanging around in the middle. When we do ourselves up, we can look pretty good. If we don't do ourselves up, we don't look so good. But through the relationship with Anna, because she is a hero type of character, William takes on the air of an underdog. Now, he is not an underdog protagonist type. He's an everyman who is aiming so high that compared to her, like he is, like I said, he's way out of his league. And we are rooting for him to get the girl, because that's the nature of a Richard Curtis rom-com, right? And it's not because Anna is so amazing, because to be honest, she does not treat him very well at all. Which is why, Melanie, I really loved when you did your premise statement from her perspective, because it was really interesting. So we're not rooting for them to be together because Anna is such a great catch. She's a bit, she's messed up, frankly. But because we want William to be happy, and we think that even though she's kind of messed up and she hasn't necessarily treated him that well, Julia Roberts has done such a good job portraying her and showing her vulnerability through some of the behavior that's not very nice. We genuinely believe that they're going to be happy together and that it will be a true love, like the couple who had the bench dedicated to them. We really think that he has a shot at true love with Anna. And, if just in case that, extended opening monologue, that extended opening voiceover wasn't quite enough to make us realize that William is an everyman, there are actually multiple references to William being quote unquote normal. At about the halfway point, Anna literally calls him normal. She says, quote, "Anytime I've tried to keep anything normal with a person that was normal, it's just been a disaster." At an hour and 25 minutes in, and this is after Anna has been discovered in William's home and Anna has freaked out, William says, quote, "All I'm asking for is a normal amount of perspective." And then later, William says, quote, "I'm a fairly level-headed bloke, not often in or out of love." And of course, then at 1 hour, 40 minutes, this is when Anna gives her famous speech, right? This is when she says, quote, "The fame thing isn't really real, you know. Don't forget, I'm also just a girl standing in front of a boy asking him to love her." Now, she's not really, quote, just a girl. She's a famous movie star who desperately wants to be just a girl. She's not, and she never will be. But William is most definitely just a boy, and Anna knows that. In fact, she's highly attracted to his normalness and to his everymanness. I mean, there's not much more for me to say, Melanie. I know it's short and sweet, but it's so on the nose. That's
I
kind of it.
Yeah. It's a pretty straightforward movie this week, isn't it, for
Pretty
both of us?
straightforward
It's
movie.
pretty good.
All right. So, with all that said, what are your final thoughts about Notting Hill this week?
Well, I think practicing writing one-line summaries of movies like Notting Hill or books that people have read is a good thing to do. And if you treat it like wordplay, it'll put you in the right frame of mind and it'll take some of the pressure off you to, either get it right, have it perfect, because it doesn't need to be either of those things. And if you do it, you'll get a great feel for good story ideas. And perhaps you'll discover an idea that's worth pursuing.
All right. Well, that wraps it up for this week. Join us again next week when we discuss Hidden Figures. To support the show, please leave us a rating and review and tell your writer friends about us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. To find out more about our courses and training, visit storynerd.ca. To join my inner circle, go to valeriefrancis.ca/inner circle. And for more information about Melanie's books, visit melaniehill.au. And remember, story theory does not have to be difficult. It's a tool to help you write more, not less. So take it one step at a time. Have fun.